When you reach for that carton of eggs at the grocery store, the one with the sunny label, the picture of hens on green grass, the words cage-free or free range, you're being told a story. And according to today's guest, almost none of it is true. Amber Canavan is the Associate Director of Vegan Campaigns at PETA, People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals. She spent years pulling back the curtain on what the food industry doesn't want you to see. Today, she's here to talk about humane washing, the practice of using feel-good labels to disguise what's really happening to billions of animals every year. This is Puppies, Pandemics, and Public Health. Let's pick up the conversation with Johnny and Amber.
Amber Canavan, thank you so much for joining Puppies, Pandemics, and Public Health today. It's a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I wanted to start off with, what do you think is the most important topic we're going to cover today? What's the most important point that you don't want our listening audience to miss?
Well, I think the main thing is that every animal is someone. So I want people to keep that in mind as we're kind of talking through these like specific cruelties that are found in different industries and the ways that animals are used. So every animal is someone. They're an individual. They can feel pain. They have their own wants and needs, and they don't want to suffer or have their lives taken away just for a chicken nugget, a burger, or a breakfast sandwich. And also that we have found over decades of investigations is that whenever animals are used for profit, they inevitably suffer. And that's what we're going to be talking about and digging into a lot today is this topic of humane washing, which has become a big problem.
Amber, would you like to explain for our listeners who don't know what humane washing means?
It's derived from greenwashing. So greenwashing has happened on environmental topics. So you hear terms like clean coal and stuff like that, or it's recyclable. And oftentimes these things were not created to actually significantly change the way companies are maybe polluting the environment, but to make the consumers feel more comfortable about continuing to buy those products, even though there is environmental toll to coal usage and plastic usage. The same goes for animal-derived products, meat, dairy, eggs, and other things like honey. And basically, these companies know from the good work of PETA and grassroots activists and other organizations over the past few decades that the public is more aware of how bad animals are treated for meat, dairy, and eggs. And they feel bad about it and they want to do something about it. And the meat, dairy, and egg industries, instead of switching over to making vegan hot dogs and vegan eggs instead of getting them from animals, have created all these marketing terms and these really feel-goody labels. And they're keeping people buying these things with these assurances that the animals are being treated well. And PETA has done investigations into free range and cage free and humane certified and animal welfare certified, all the nice buzzwords that you can think of. And behind the scenes, these are still factory farms at the end of the day. These animals are still being treated as commodities and as widgets in a machine and not as the individuals that they are.
Thanks for explaining that, Amber. It's a lot of deception. The consumer is being deceived by deceptive marketing, deceptive labeling, really just to get your money if you're a consumer and you're not aware of what Amber just said. The picture on the package of a happy chicken on the free range is not necessarily, and almost certainly not, the chicken that's producing the egg that you're buying. The cow that you see next to a red barn with sunshine and 3 or 4 other cows on the beef package that you're buying. It's not true. Almost 100% of the meat, for example, that you buy in a grocery store comes from factory farmed meat. The factory farmed cows, the animals living a miserable life from the moment they're born until the time they're slaughtered. It's completely deceptive advertising. And we know that in part because of work done by PETA and other organizations. Undercover footage doesn't lie. This is something big agriculture industries and egg producers don't want you to know. They often do a great job of keeping it under wraps so that they can continue to get your money. It's been shown in independent market research that a large majority of consumers at least say that how animals are treated on farms matters, and they're willing to spend more money thinking that they're contributing to this better life for the animal until the time it gets slaughtered. And agribusiness and dairy, they know that. That's why they have these deceptive marketing campaigns, and they can charge an extra $1 or $2 for a dozen of eggs or for pasture-raised beef that the consumer is willing to pay for, and it's duping the consumer. And not until those companies are held accountable, often with a lawsuit to hold them accountable, does that get revealed. So thanks for bringing all that up. Amber, humane washing, it's rampant out there. Do you have any recent examples from either your work or other areas you've involved in of example of humane washing to share with the listening audience that they might have heard, with a company they might have heard of?
Well, we have done a number of investigations. One of them was Nellie's free range eggs. So with a lot of these types of buzzwords and labels, you'll hear something like free range or cage free. And in your mind, you're kind of filling out the rest, right? They kind of leave it a little vague enough, and the consumer kind of fills it out in their mind. And usually it's a lot more airy and bright and much better conditions than what's actually happening behind these closed doors. Or if they maybe do show the conditions, they are highly only what they want people to see. So Nellie's free range eggs, for example, has these beautiful images on their website and on their packaging showing like little girls cuddling chickens in their arms with some grass in the background. When PETA looked in behind the scenes, it was 20,000 hens crammed into a giant shed. They had just a bit over a square foot of floor space each. And then the rules for the cage-free label only require that they need access to the outdoors. And access can mean, in this case, small hatches that were punctuated on every several feet around the side of the building to a fairly barren, fenced-in area. The birds aren't required to go out every day. They just have to be given access so they can be able to put that label on.
Before I switched to eating plant-based, I was one of the consumers in that space. And I said, free range, that sounds great. And I saw the picture. And at that point, I was like, yeah, I'm willing to spend an extra $1 a dozen to get that. And you fill in the blanks. That's what you do. But that, again, free range, the animals are trapped inside. Well, they're not trapped. They have access for a little bit. They have access to the outside, but they don't go there on their own accord for the most part. So there's still 10, 20,000 animals spending nearly all of their life in this enclosed area. And have you been inside those in part of your work, Amber?
I've been inside a cage-free egg facility. Cage-free facilities can confine hens into as little as 1 square foot of floor space per bird. If they aren't given some vertical space, such as some perching bars, they have to give them 1.5 square feet, which is not much of an improvement. That's really not much space for any animal to live their life, much less a chicken. Chickens are constantly moving around. They are very highly social and have complex lives. Everything about living inside of a giant shed with tens of thousands of other birds is chaotic. It's loud. It is smelly. And not just smelly in every place that has farmed animals will have some manure. This is built up manure that goes into the bedding. And actually, our white paper that PETA just released found that cage-free facilities actually have higher rates of respiratory problems because the birds are just constantly moving and kicking up this like ammonia and feces-laden air. It's actually worse air quality than a battery cage facility. And don't get me wrong, like battery cages are a horrible, horrible invention that should have never, ever become anything allowed to be done to hens in the first place. But when we're seeing battery cages being replaced with cage-free, that is just not a solution. You can't still cram that many animals into a large building and not have problems. So birds on cage-free facilities have higher rates of respiratory disease. They have higher rates of breaking their bones because they are constantly being jostled and having to fight for space on a perch. They're getting knocked down from the perches constantly since there's just not enough perches for everyone. They're fighting for nest boxes. They need to fight through a crowd of birds to get to the water. They have to do the same to get over to the food. And that is the experience of every minute of every day of their life. There's nowhere to hide. There's nowhere to get some peace and quiet. Even if they go into a nest box, there's probably other birds trying to use it at the same time. And that happens for about a year, year and a half. Most birds never see their second year birthday. They are killed as soon as their egg production starts to decline. They're either gassed right on the property or they are sent to slaughter. And of course, at the slaughterhouse, they're hung by their very delicate legs upside down in metal shackles and then, run through stunning baths. And oftentimes, PETA's also documented birds go through the entire slaughter process conscious because they may miss the stun bath and end up in the scalding hot feather removal tanks while conscious. So millions of birds get scalded to death in slaughterhouses every year because of the way that we mass kill at high speeds, about 9.5 billion, close to 10 billion. It varies a bit by year, chickens every year in the United States, including chickens used for eggs. That's another thing a lot of people don't really realize. There's no retirement home for chickens used for eggs. They're killed at a fraction of their natural lifespan. Chickens can live for a decade if they are well cared for and dodge some of the common health problems that come up from being bred to either be used for their eggs or their flesh. But they are all mass killed before their second birthday, if they even survive that long. A lot of them are pecked to death by frustrated cage mates, which is an awful symptom of keeping these highly intelligent feeling beings crammed in together with not enough space to live their lives. We call them individuals. The ancestors to domesticated chickens were the red jungle fowl, and just like most other species of birds would lay 10 to 15 eggs a year. To go from that to 350 eggs per year takes an enormous toll on their bodies. And that's why you see them dying from reproductive diseases. They'll get cysts, they'll get cancers, they'll get eggs stuck up in there, they'll get infections. If the egg farm doesn't take them out and slaughter them, they would be also dying from these reproductive diseases because of these really horrible, unethical breeding practices.
And the rest of their bodies aren't designed they can't keep up, right? They die of heart failure. Their hearts can't pump enough blood to reach all the parts of their body. So their hearts enlarge and they die of heart failure. They've been bred to grow so abnormally large so quickly that their legs break. They don't get veterinary care. So when the animals get sick, it's a cost of doing business. They're commodities. And so I want to try and dispel the idea that when you buy a neatly packaged white chicken breast in a store, if it says natural or fresh or humanely raised, that can't be further from the truth.
Doesn't really mean much.
It's a myth. It doesn't mean much. If anything, this is an animal that suffered its entire life, living in its own stool, bred to have a body that grows so fast that its internal organs can't keep up. It's living in these ammonia-choked, noxious living conditions its entire life with horrible air. And then when it comes time to die, this vicious process that you talked about, one of the things that I learned is, unlike cows, which have some protections under the law, there's a process for, it's called the Humane Slaughter Act, which that's a whole nother discussion as to whether how that can even be humane.
Chickens
There's
are exempt from the
no,
Humane Slaughter Act.
Yeah.
There's no federal law that protects birds, so that includes turkeys as well, and ducks. There's no federal law that protects them while they're on the farm. There's a very small patchwork of laws statewide, but again, millions of chickens go through the slaughter process, which is already horrible and painful and terrifying enough if it even goes properly. But millions of them, due to the speed of these slaughter lines and how mechanized everything is, they're on this conveyor belt hung up by their legs, going through. The whirring blade might miss their throats. The human who's supposed to be catching the ones who miss the whirring blade might also miss them. And they are literally being scalded alive in these feather removal tanks or drowning.
routinely, right?
Routinely. I mean, this happens to millions of birds. And that's, again, business as usual. That is acceptable to the industry because you're dealing with such volume that they have built into their profit model that many animals are going to die on the farm, whether that is cage-free or free-range eggs. Some of them they know are going to die from being pecked and having horrible infections or from respiratory disease. The chickens that you're referring to who are raised for their flesh are bred to grow so quickly. They are going to slaughter at about 6 weeks of age. These are still technically baby birds. They are, in a lot of cases, they still sound like baby birds, like they're peeping. They haven't even gotten their adult voices yet, but their bodies are larger than an adult bird would be because they've been grown so quickly to get so big for profit. And then they are sent to slaughter in the same way I just described, being put up in those shackles and going through that process, literally peeping like babies the whole way.
Scoping out even bigger with the egg-laying hens, it's to create a food product that we don't even need to eat. And one can argue that, is the human body even designed to eat chicken eggs? I don't know. If you think about where it comes from and what its purpose is, it's to create, it's the reproductive cycle. Once it's fertilized, it's part of the reproductive cycle of making another chicken. How does that turn into human food?
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole point is that this is all unnecessary, and it is better for our health if we switch over to those delicious vegan foods, and you can have all of the tastes and textures and even traditional foods. You can have a fully vegan Thanksgiving spread complete with a delicious roast and the gravy and all the fixings. For breakfast, you can have your breakfast sandwich with either a just egg patty or tofu. Tofu scrambles are absolutely delicious. You can throw veggies in there as well. Nutritionally, it's just got some good stuff in there for you nutritionally, and without all that cholesterol and the cruelty, absolutely unnecessary cruelty that we are putting these animals through just to have a taste or texture that you can get elsewhere, which is better for your health and also the environment. The way these animals are raised and killed is not good for the environment. One of the top produced water polluters in the country is actually the chicken industry. So people think about fossil fuels and obviously fossil fuels are not good for the environment, or things that are bad for the water. People think about oil spills and things like that. But the top water polluter in the country is actually the chicken industry, because all these nitrates and all this waste are going into waterways. They're getting sprayed on top of crops and fields and running off because there's too much of it. There's actually been lawsuits in North Carolina and some other places. North Carolina is particularly pork production and pigs, but people who live in these areas are literally getting pig poop sprayed all into the air, and it's settling on their properties and on them and giving people asthma and health problems. That's not good for humans either. much less the outbreak potentials. We've been in the middle of an avian flu outbreak for several years. This isn't the first one we've had. It's not going to be the last. Tens of millions of birds have already been mass killed with horrifically cruel methods, such as ventilation shutdown, where they close off the air vents to these giant factory farm sheds, and the animals are basically baked to death from the heat and suffocation that builds up in these closed off barns. And people who are consuming meat, dairy, and eggs, that's part of the business as usual. When you're mass raising and killing animals for food, diseases are going to spread like wildfire. And that is part of what you're paying for as well.
You're paying for it in a way as well that I think many don't realize is that there's something called an indemnity program where chickens, for example, if a bird flu is detected and it's decided that we're going to cull or exterminate the whole flock, they get reimbursed by the taxpayer. And that's us paying for this horrible slaughter so that they can bring in a brand new flock and start all over again with the cruelty and the production of an unhealthy, completely unnecessary product.
These animals are treated as not the living beings that they are. They're treated as something that makes the company money. And when they're not making that company money, they are completely disposable and they suffer greatly as a result.
Many in our society have not made the extension or the connection that dogs and cats we think of as family, and they can suffer, and they do suffer. We see it. We can read their facial expressions. We know when they're pain. We know when they're in stress. And if you know what to look for in these farm animals, you can see it. I can't. Maybe you can. But these animals, they have the same sensations. They feel fear. They feel stress. They feel pain. When you drop them into the scalding tank of boiling hot water, they suffer just like if a dog or cat got dropped in there. It's the same. It's not viewed that way, but the suffering is the same as if it were a dog or cat, or if you have the smaller animals. Somehow the line got drawn between food animal. It's okay that they can suffer and they're really just a commodity, and companion animal.
I think it's a kind of a lie people want to tell themselves to make them feel a little less bad, maybe a little less guilty. It's a lot easier to eat an animal when you think that they're stupid and can't feel pain. But chickens are amazing animals. And I say that not just because I care for rescued chickens myself, who were rescued from cage-free farms. Mother hens talk to their chicks before they even hatch through the shell, and they learn through the shell before they're even born. Chickens can also do very basic math tasks, which a lot of young human toddlers can't even do. They outpace them in some metrics. The main important thing is that they can feel. They can feel pain and fear and suffer just like we can, just like dogs and cats can. And they deserve consideration and not to be the most abused and killed animal on the face of the planet. Chickens have beaks and make different sounds than we do, but they're incredibly expressive if you just pay attention.
Yeah, if you pay attention. And that's a huge part of it, as well as the cognitive dissonance that you mentioned. I feel like now compared to 10 or for sure 20 years ago, it's getting harder and harder to ignore the similarities between food animals and companion animals are more than we thought, I think, in the past. And the differences are not as important if you look for it. Like you said, if you don't want to look for it so that your mind, you can separate, it's okay to eat an egg from a chicken. It's okay to eat chicken flesh. It's hard to get past that, isn't it, Amber? To make people at least start asking those questions and challenging those long-held beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely come a long way. I do remember talking to people outside of KFC 15, 20 years ago, and they didn't think chickens felt pain at all. Now it's very rare to hear anyone still with that opinion, but they are oftentimes repeating lines that they have heard from the industries of, well, I buy cage free though. Isn't that okay? No, it's not okay. It's still cramming these animals into wing to wing, and they're still suffering from respiratory problems, and they're still getting their beaks removed at the hatchery. So without any pain relief, the chicken's
No
beak
anesthesia,
is
right?
the most sensitive parts of their bodies. It's like their fingers. It's how they experience and feel the world. And it is routine, even for cage-free and even some free-range companies. They source the hens from hatcheries that remove the tips of the beaks of these hens when they're baby chicks before they come to the farm. The other thing we haven't even touched on is what happens to the male chicks at these hatcheries, because they don't lay eggs. They're not the correct breed of bird to be worth it, they say, to raise for their flesh. So hatcheries mass kill all the male baby chicks, whether it's a conventional farm, cage-free, pasture-raised, or even the baby chicks that are sold at the farm supply stores for backyard eggs. There's a reason why those feed stores are only selling female chicks. Although a lot of people still accidentally do end up with males. Those male chicks at the hatchery are killed either by gassing, suffocation, or by being put through what they call a macerator. So they are ground up alive. It's kind of like a big wood chipper or blender.
Ugh.
The females go down one conveyor belt to go to the farm, and the males go down another conveyor belt into a funnel where they are going to be killed in a very gruesome way. Factory farming at the end of the day is the most efficient way. Factory farming prizes efficiency and profits over the living beings who are being used to make those profits.
So even in the ideal world where cage-free meant something and pasture-raised, and even if that meant something, there's still all these other horrors going on, which Amber touched on, that aren't even discussed with the whole cage-free discussion or free range. It's a vile industry. And so, Amber, if someone cares at all about chickens, what should they be doing?
Reach over, instead of grabbing that carton of eggs, grab the tofu or grab the Just Egg scramble. It's delicious. You can make your breakfast sandwiches. You can make whatever you're going to make, just the vegan versions of it. Your health is going to thank you. Your carbon footprint's going to be a lot better. And you're not going to be paying a company that's lying to you.
As a consumer, you should be angry. You should have, putting aside the animal welfare issue, going out into the non-animal space. If you had a company that was misbranding their product in order to get you to pay more, and you found out about it, wouldn't that alone be enough to say, I'm not going to shop here anymore? I'm going to go somewhere else and buy my product? As a consumer, I hate being lied to so that someone could get my money. And that's completely outside the welfare, but that's built into this model. So that should be considered as well. Consumers deserve to be given the accurate information, and they're not routinely.
Yeah, that extra money that they're charging for that label that makes you feel a whole lot better is not going towards the animals. It is lining some meat or dairy or egg industry person's pockets. You know, the animals are not seeing much, if any, difference in their lives. And in some ways, it can be worse when you are going to cram animals together, as we saw in the cage-free white paper we just released. Higher rates of broken bones. Imagine having a broken clavicle. You know, that's kind of the equivalent of the chicken's breastbone, their keel bone. Imagine having a broken bone that's never treated. That's what a lot of these birds in these cage-free facilities are suffering with every day. And it's not visible, but it is causing them suffering. Just for an egg, we can eat something else.
We can eat something else. Absolutely. And I can speak as someone who's struggled with that not too long ago and tried some of these other products. Just Egg, you can make scrambled eggs with that. That's one thing that I struggled with initially, but realized that it's something that is helpful to get past. You don't have to have a product that tastes 100% like the product you've grown up with. It's helpful to have something that tastes good, is pleasing to the palate. If you're seeking something that's 100% like it, it's going to be tough. But I've made the switch. I love tofu scramble. I was very dubious at first. Said there's no way it's going to taste anything like scrambled eggs. And guess what? It's a very mild flavor, and it's got a very similar texture. And I've done it, and I grew up eating meat, eggs, and dairy most of my life. And I feel like if I can make the switch, open my mind to a growing marketplace of substitutes out there or alternative options, I could do it. Anyone could do it. And I truly believe that. And the market is growing. Some of the market is listening, that there's more and more people as they get informed from work that Amber is doing and others out there in this space that don't want to tolerate and support the cruelty. And you ask the question, what else is there? Well, there's plenty. We can go through every single food product and come up with a different version of it, which will satisfy the need of your palate and let fewer animals have to suffer in this process. And I know because I've done it myself, and as I've made this transition away from eating animal flesh and their secretions and their reproductive products, there's other options out there. I've made the switch. I looked into it on my own. I've seen it. And if I could do it, I feel like anyone should be able to.
Yeah. And if you don't like something too, try something else.
Try something else.
But a lot of people have these pretty skewed taste buds. Our society pushes all this like greasy animal derived foods, so cheese and hamburgers and things like that. And I enjoy a good Beyond Burger or something every once in a while. Human health is a huge portion of this. We are eating these sad, diseased, manipulated animals who are living in absolutely filthy conditions. And that, that does something to us when we eat that. We have our old PETA slogan, meat, it's what's rotting in your colon. And that still very, very much rings true. You're eating an animal who is not in good health in most cases. It doesn't take long to see people posting videos of these like tumor-filled steaks and chicken breasts that have stuff oozing out of them. I mean, these animals are going to slaughter with cysts and tumors and infections. And then people are eating that stuff.
That's a really good segue into the foie gras. You're well familiarized with the topic. You've been working on it. So talking about a diseased animal that humans have no business eating, introduce us to foie gras, Amber, and what that's like.
Foie gras is the diseased liver of a duck or goose who has been force-fed to the point of their liver swelling up to 10 times its normal size. And then there's very few restaurants that sell this as a high-end delicacy. These birds are forced to consume way more food than they would naturally, and they have a tube shoved down their throat to get them to do that. It's one of the cruelest products out there. It has been banned in many countries. A whole bunch of companies like Whole Foods and IKEA, Wolfgang Puck, other companies have banned it in their product lines. And the state of California has also banned the production and sale of it. And hopefully more places are following suit soon.
And from the medical side of it, fatty liver disease is a disease in humans that you don't want to get. It usually develops over years of eating a horrible diet, processed foods, fatty foods, animal products. And it's a disease. It's a liver that's full of excess fat, which doesn't belong in the liver. And in humans, that leads to scarring and inflammation and liver disease. If it goes untreated long enough, it leads to cirrhosis, which has a whole other host of problems, which lead to chronic illnesses. It's a diseased liver that takes usually years to develop in humans, something you don't want. How this became a human food product from a duck, it's beyond me. This process was created to give these animals a diseased liver in a number of weeks for a process that takes humans much, much longer than that. And it's something you don't want. And it's considered a delicacy. Humans have no business eating it. And I could make a pretty solid argument of that as well for eggs, which come from chickens. But we've been told this is food. This is a product that we should be eating. And looking at it from a different lens as someone, again, who's not been in the space very long, it's kind of ludicrous to me that somehow this has been marketed as human food fit for consumption, and a fatty diseased liver from a duck is really not.
Yeah, it's absolutely unnecessary. It's very high in fat. I describe it as factory farming plus force feeding because these animals are still in many of the same factory farm conditions as other animals raised and killed for food, plus the force feeding that happens 3 times a day in the latter part of their lives while their livers are being fattened right before slaughter. So they are kept in these pens suspended over this river of their own waste in the shed.
You've been inside these facilities personally, correct?
Yes, I have investigated. I've seen it with my own eyes. Sometimes I feel like I can smell it in the back of my nose some days, even though I haven't been there in years and years. The memory of it kind of never leaves you. Their livers are marketed in a similar way to eggs. The farm has a sign out front that says cage free because they're kept in pens in groups of 10 or 12 birds, and they market themselves as cage free. They'll use the term local, artisanal, gourmet, all sorts of buzzwords, again, that kind of fill your mind with these lovely images when in reality, these birds never see sunshine or grass for their entire lives. There's windowless shed. The air is thick with the smell of ammonia and feces. They never see anything other than walls of their pens, force feeding tubes that are suspended over them, and the workers who are there to force feed them several times a day until the day they are taken out of those pens and brought to the on-site slaughterhouse.
I mean, were you there, Amber, for the feeding events?
So there's been numerous investigations, not just the one I participated in. And one actually did just get released. A photojournalist entered Hudson Valley Foie Gras on one of their public, what we call white glove tours. So that means you're kind of seeing what they want you to see. You're expected. They're making sure that there aren't any ducks with any visible broken legs or wings, which is what I witnessed being there, not on one of the public tours. Previous investigations into the industry have found ducks with perforated throats. Their necks had been pierced by the feeding tube, the metal feeding tube. It's very interesting to see this level of humane washing from this industry. They know people have this visceral reaction. Force feeding does not sound good. People who've had to have it done for medical reasons know that it is not a happy thing to have done to you. And it's not a happy thing to be done to a duck.
What you've seen and the work you've done, how could this not take an emotional toll on you, someone who obviously cares about the animals? I don't know that I would be able to do this kind of work. I mean, if you're okay sharing a little bit of that, how do you deal with that? How do you see that and then go on and be able to talk so intelligently about it and persuasive and be such an advocate?
I don't know how I do it some days. Seeing the animals at sanctuaries is so helpful. If anyone who lives near a reputable or accredited farmed animal sanctuary where you can meet those animals, it can be very therapeutic. And also caring for my own adopted hens gives me a lot of peace. The main thing for me is that action is the antidote to despair. That's what keeps me going, is that we all have that ability to make change and create that world that we are fighting for. There's so much work to be done and so many people's talents to be harnessed too. After a long time, figured out what my talents could be. Other people have their own talents and interests and can apply them to helping animals, and everybody should, because we need more help. And that's my closing call to action is anyone who is moved by anything I said today, go to PETA.org, sign up for our action team. We can always use more people working on these campaigns. Join a protest, order our vegan starter kit guides to put in your local library, join the efforts to ban foie gras in your own city. There is endless work to be done, and PETA has the resources for people to get active for animals.
And what I would encourage, again, if any of what Amber mentioned spoke to you, take a step at least. As Amber said, there's plenty of products out there to satisfy your palate. I know because I've experimented with them. Do I like all of them? No. But there's definitely, the market is getting better. There's more out there. Personally, I'm finding them, and the transition does not need to be difficult. Start off a little at a time. On another podcast, one of my guests said, just start with replacing eggs in your baking. Start with something simple like that. There's at least 2 products on the market, and Amber probably knows of more. I don't bake a lot, but you can replace an egg easily with a chickpea powder or some other product that's out there, and you won't know the difference. Start small. If any of this touched you, you can grow from that as long as you're open to the idea, and it has benefits beyond the animals, like Amber talked about, health benefits to you and your family, environmental benefits, reduced water pollution, reduced air pollution. It doesn't even have to really be a sacrifice. It involves inquisitive mind, making one little change, and finding out that it's going to work for you. There's so many other ways to do it that help all the beings on the planet, as well as helps the animals, helps humans. It's better for an environment. Start small if you're not convinced, and do your own research. And Amber just gave you a great resource at PETA.
PETA.org, you can get that free vegan starter guide mailed to you, or we have like meal plans and all that stuff on our website as well. We post recipes all the time on our social media, plus all the cute chicken videos that you can see there to give you some inspirations.
Amber, thank you so much for joining the show. I know I learned a lot, and I'm hopeful that our listeners did too. Thanks so much for taking your time and being on here today.
Thanks for listening. These conversations aren't always easy, but they matter, and they're worth having. If you enjoyed this episode, you can find more information, videos, and updates at johnliebermanmd.com. Take what resonates, ask questions, and keep learning. The content of this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only. It is not medical or legal advice and does not replace speaking with a qualified professional. Always seek guidance specific to your situation.